Here's an example of a flexible budget. Instead of the traditional budget and this Excel model you have, a flexible budget is one that more and more organizations are using. Instead of the traditional approach, which let's say would be our 12,000 units. You look at your spreadsheet, in the middle on the top line, we've got number of units per month ranging from 10,000 to 15,000. 12,000 is what we expect to produce and sell. That's what we've done in the past. A traditional budget would say that's the numbers we'd use. So if you only look at the column beneath 12,000, that would be our traditional budget. We've got our number of units, we've got our variable cost, which you can, because you have the spreadsheet, carry out so you see all of the variable costs, the contribution margin, the fixed cost, of course, don't change regardless of our volume, and our bottom line. Well, the challenge is, for each of us, in reality, when we're creating a budget, we know in certain circumstances that the 12,000 units perhaps will have a lower demand because of reason 1, 2, and 3. So maybe it'd be 10 or 11,000. Or if we do a good marketing job, if we break into a new market, if a competitor stumbles, etc., maybe the demand in the marketplace will be higher than we expect, 13, 14, etc. The reason and the benefit of a flexible budget, and the reason we create it, is because it allows us to look at alternatives from a practical standpoint. Again, going back to the beginning of the module, the beginning of our discussion, forecasts are where we test alternatives before we commit to the budget. And the budget in the traditional sense is X units at Y dollars gives us Z return. But from a practical standpoint, if we're in a marketplace that potentially could vary, either based on the number of units we sell, or you could turn this sideways, on the price that we could get, if it's a commodity, then maybe we can create alternative budgets and get it approved subject to X. In this case, it's the number of units. If we're selling commodities, oil, gas, coal, cotton, wheat, etc., then the market price is unpredictable. It's a commodity. So maybe we're talking about 10 per unit versus 12 per unit versus 15 per unit. If we use the traditional budget approach, then all we're going to get is one fixed budget that can't possibly be right, except 1 in 1,000 times. If we drive the alternative budgets on parallel columns as we have here, we can say, based on the changing critical variable in the marketplace, this will be our budget. It actually gives us the opportunity to be more accurate because we have the alternatives here than the traditional approach. So that's why more and more organizations who are in marketplaces that either have high volatility in selling price, like on commodities, or high volatility in volume, certain other products, software as an example, are moving from the traditional approach to the flexible budget approach. Now, the third budget model we'll look at is zero-based budgeting. And some of you might have been through a zero-based budgeting approach. Zero-based budgeting effectively is a tool that is used to reduce the unnecessary waste that's built into most budgets. We all have seen budgets that get artificially inflated each year. How does this happen? Well, part of it is ego behind it, and part of it is the system that many, many organizations have created. And you've seen this all the time. As we approach the end of the year, certain managers, certain leaders realize we haven't spent all the money in our budget for X, so there's a sudden flurry of spending. because unless I spend all of my money this year, how do I justify even more money next year? And unless I get more money next year than this year, I'm not as important as somebody else who gets an increase. That's ego. That's not being practical. Zero-based budgeting originally was developed for governmental organizations to reduce the wasteful year-end spending. Now, I'm not saying that spending our budget more at the end of the year than the beginning by its nature is bad. That's certainly not true. Depends on our needs. But if an organization or a department or any operating unit only is spending money near the end of an operating cycle to make sure that they get rid of all of their budget to justify a larger budget, that's where the problem is. So what zero-based budgeting does is zero-based budgeting says, go through your budget, line item by line item, justify what you need. Anything that cannot be justified will be reduced. And in an extreme case, it'll be reduced to zero. Why? It was designed to eliminate automatic increases. It was designed to eliminate wasteful spending. Some organizations operate consistently with zero-based budgets. Anything you cannot fully justify goes to zero, and you still must achieve your goals every single year. Other organizations periodically take a zero-based budgeting approach. Our budget's out of control. We have too much waste. This year, we're going to go through the budget line item by line item. You must justify every expenditure. It's a way to get an organization that perhaps has gotten out of control on its spending back in line with spending what it needs to rather than what it has. Zero-based budgeting is a cost reduction tool. The best way to effectively use zero-based budgeting is to combine it with a continuous process improvement initiative. In other words, going through the organization, starting with a value stream map, moving down, identifying the critical processes, then developing a process map to identify the areas of improvement and waste, then developing a series of action steps to reduce or eliminate that waste, getting the entity, getting the organization to operate in a leaner manner without going through, quote, cost reduction, which is temporary. Continuous process improvement is permanent because it changes the culture of the organization. It identifies unnecessary expenditures to still achieve the same results. If an organization combines continuous process improvement with zero-based budgeting, it can dramatically change and refocus the organization in achieving the goals they set out to achieve and reducing or eliminating the wasteful expenditures that add no value.